tonight we're doing our third Strut Your Stuff. And I can remember what motivated me to kind of put that together. I can remember Patty Pennington. She had books and diagrams and all these kinds of things that were just fascinating. And I so much wanted to know more. And there were other people who I wanted to see their garden. So I kind of came up with the format of the 5 speakers for 10 minutes. And I was so nervous the night before I couldn't even sleep because I didn't know if it would be an acceptable idea or a terrible idea, but it turned out okay. So tonight, our moderator is going to be Nancy. You can take it away, Nancy.
Laura Bradley is a dedicated master naturalist with a deep-rooted passion for environmental conservation. She's an active member of the Native Plant Society and generously volunteers her time and expertise at Armand Bayou Nature Center, making a significant impact in preserving and promoting our natural world.
So since I'm not an expert on wetlands plants and I'm talking about my pond, I decided rather than talking about all the plants like probably all the other presenters are going to, I am going to talk about the actual construction of the pond. And I did a lot of research before I started it. There are a lot of places online where you can look and see what to do. And by the time I finished looking, I was totally intimidated and decided after all of that to go ahead and do it. So I'll share with you what I did and my mistakes and all of that. So this is called Creating a Habitat Pond, because the research said that was the title I wanted to call it, was a habitat pond, or Making My Happy Place. So the tools that I used for the actual digging are shown here, plus a wagon and lots of bags and buckets. There are basically 3 different types of ponds you can use. One, it would be a clay pond, which is basically dig a hole in the ground because Houston gumbo is pretty clayey, and so it will hold water for a while, and the plants can then be planted directly into the ground. But you will get some water leakage into the ground. Another option is a preformed pond. And then the third option would be a liner. And I will discuss my pond, which is a liner. The first thing you need to do is choose the thickness of the liner. The thicker will last longer, but it's heavier for lassoing into the pond. I used a 45 mil thickness. And there's all kinds of different types of materials you can use. I ended up using EDPM. I ordered it from Amazon. It's supposed to last about 20 years and be puncture proof. I bought a 15-foot by 15-foot for just over $200. You can also get a 15 mil thinner one from Home Depot or Lowe's. What I did was we already had a little pond, and it was the preformed pond. And so I dug that out and put in a liner. And there's a picture of what our preformed pond looked like. Pace yourself. I worked on the digging part for about an hour per day for 2 or 3 days per week for about 8 weeks. And hire some muscle. This was a high school kid from our church. He came out and helped me do some digging. The books say, don't do it yourself if it's bigger than 100 gallons. And mine's about 300 or 400 gallons. Dig. And then plan on what you're going to do with the dirt that you dig up, because there will be a lot of it. By the time I finished, I had dirt and buckets and bags everywhere. And if you're putting the pond in a yard with trees, which most of us have, you will have to cut some roots. I used some aluminum sheeting at the end of the roots so that I could guide the roots in the direction I wanted them to go. I also had some rocks from my previous pond that I had removed and then I reused. And plan what you're going to do if it rains before you're ready to start putting in the liner. It rained 2 inches just after I'd finished digging. And that's a picture of what it looked like then. I had a pump for the waterfall in the previous pond, and that pump came in very helpful when it came time to drain the pond. So there is the pump, and there's the pond. And there it is, that almost finished. It was so muddy. That is it, totally empty. And next thing to do is build some shelves so that you can have some various depths in the pond. And you need to figure out what depth of the shelves you want based on the pots and how far below, how much water each plant can hold, can handle. And there's another picture of the shelving. I did not put shelving here because I'm going to put a waterfall here. And I did not put shelving here because that's going to be my access. Add an inch or two of sand to protect the liner. Lay out the liner. Put the liner over the hole. And a rough cut on the liner, just with scissors. Cover the edges of the to prevent water from getting underneath the liner. I dug trenches. It's about a 2-inch trench right here, and then buried it under the and put clay. And that was clay that I had dug up from in the hole. And there's actually what the trench looked like. Final cut of the liner. Add rocks to hold down the edges. And once I did that, I decided I had left too much over here. So I pulled up the rocks and ended up cutting the liner some more. And then shaped the liner. Step on the liner to get all the slack. I did not do this well enough the first time, so I had to go back, take away all the rocks, and loosen the clay, and then step down on the liner so that it was touching the ground in all places. Because when I put in water, you could tell the liner was being stretched. Fill it with water. You can either use a hose or just be patient and let the Houston fill it. And there it is after I had cut the right side over here. And that's my access right there for the animals. Add side beds for interest. I used some of the clay that I had dug up to put a bed here. And then there was another bed over on the right side. I added animal access here so that if an animal went into the pond, it would be able to go up, get out. I didn't want to have a drowned bird or something in my pond. Also turns out that this access is good if you need to go into the pond yourself. And then call in the reserves. About halfway through, I had a hawk come in and watch what I was doing. Add some rock formations. This is my little waterfall. And when building your waterfall, you want to make sure all the flow is directed into the pond. Otherwise, you'll end up with losing water from the pond, or you'll end up with too much water behind the waterfall, and it'll stay wet all the time. So some patience with where the outlet from the pump actually goes. And I got a little solar geyser that will actually provide some interest to the pond. Add plants. I got mine from Green Star in Alvin. They have a really good website with plant availability and how much depth each plant requires. And then I added some plants I had in my yard. The crinum was from the previous. And then I also had some aquatic milkweed in a couple pots that I moved out there. I put the plants in containers and then put rocks on top to hold in the soil. And there it is with some plants in the new bed and the wetland plants in the pond. You may need to continue adding water depending on how much the plants need water above them and how much it's rained and how much you get on the solar radiation. And you can add fish if desired. I didn't, but if you do, let the water sit for a few days for the pH to stabilize and the chlorine to disappear. I also bought some recycled plastic patio furniture to put out there. And so this is my happy place.
Oh, great. Laura, that's beautiful. Just beautiful. What approximate dimensions was it?
It's about 15 feet by 6 feet by, I was trying to make it 18 inches, but it ended up being more like a 15-inch step.
Wow. We have a question. What did you do with all the dirt you dug out?
Most of it I ended up reusing because of the bed here and the bed over here, and then the trenches I used. I still have 2 bags of clay sitting in a bag in my yard, but most of it did get reused.
Was the August drought of any problem?
Yes, I had to fill the pond several times during the drought.
Yeah. Okay, what time of year did you do the install?
I started, I think it was in April, and I think I ended up buying the plants at the end of July.
Okay. So what maintenance is needed now?
Not much.
Much. Wow.
So you need to watch the level because my plants are supposed to be submerged all the time, and you just need to watch the level and add water.
Okay.
I haven't had any point where it's gotten too deep yet.
Yeah. Well, and having had your experience with your former pond, the preformed one, probably helped you, didn't it? With maybe how to handle it once you were putting the plants in?
Yeah, well, the preformed one didn't have any plants in it.
Oh, okay.
And it had when it was built, it had rocks inside it so you could conceal the waterfall. And the rocks, there was probably 300 or 400 pounds of rocks, and they had put a real hairline crack in the preformed. And so that one we were having to put water in 2 or 3 times a week. It wasn't a fast leak, but it was enough.
Yeah. Okay, someone asked, do you have a filter?
No, I have a little palm skimmer net that I use occasionally to get leaves out, but that's it.
So in the fall, you don't worry about all your tree leaves falling in?
I have to pick them out or with the net.
Yeah. Okay. And someone asked how deep, but you said 15 inches?
Yeah, it's 12 inches to 15 inches. I probably, going in retrospect, would have made it a little bit deeper. But that would have been more digging and more dirt.
Right. All right. What wildlife have you seen around your pond?
Just after I finished it, there was a yellow-crowned night heron that sat on the edge of it and sat and stared at it for about 15 minutes. And I'm going, there's nothing in there. And after about 15 minutes, he went over to one of my beds and found something in 30 seconds and left.
I see.
The Carolina wrens love sitting over on the rocks by where the animal access is.
Oh, I bet. Well, we thank you so much, Laura. This was great. Okay, on to the next presenter. Cheryl Baraha is a dedicated native plant enthusiast, currently serving as our chapter plant sale committee chair. With her expertise as a master gardener since 2012 and a master naturalist since 2019, Cheryl's passion for the environment and over 5 years of active membership in the Native Plant Society make her a valued advocate for sustaining gardening and native plant conservation.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Barajas, and this is a brief representation of my yard. This was my yard in 2017. As you can see, it was pretty much all underwater, and it was underwater for 4 or 5 days. So at that point, I was not a true native plant grower, so it wasn't a big loss. This is an aerial view of my front yard. We have very large oak trees in the front. Most of the front yard is very shaded. So it's been a challenge to find plants that will grow and flourish in almost complete shade. But I've managed to find some. As you can see, I've got one section that does get sun in the afternoon, but the rest is pretty much all shade. It's taken me a long time to figure out how to do it. It's just a mismatch right now of different plants. I've got beauty berries, I've got endless sea oats, I've got frostweed, there's a coral berry back there. It's just been an experiment trying to find things that will thrive in shade. So I'm still working on the front. I just keep adding new beds every year. So this is the latest one that I added this spring. And my neighbor came over and wanted to know if I had buried someone in the front yard because he thought it looked like a burial mound. But I kind of just dug up different things that I had elsewhere. I have some sunflowers and some coreopsis, and there's my pawpaw. I have some salvia in there, but now it's completely filled in. It didn't take any more than 3 or 4 months for it to fill in. This is another view of the new bed that I made. This is a bluebell that I planted in the front in that new bed. And it bloomed pretty much all summer too. And every time it rained, the few times it rained, it would just pop right back up and start blooming again. This is an aerial view of my back. As you can see, it gets dappled shade. I do get a little more sun in the backyard, but at certain times of the day, it is pretty shaded also. So I've had to concentrate all the plants that grow in the sun in certain areas that get more sun than others. As you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, that is my stock tank with my water plants. We did have a pond at one time, and we took it out at the beginning of this year because our yard is on a slope, and it was difficult to take care of that pond. So we decided to rethink that idea and start over again. Nothing wrong with starting over. This is behind our backyard, so you can see we live in a pretty wooded area, which we love. There's not a whole lot of direct sunlight. This is a picture of behind my fence. 3 years ago, the city notified us and 2 of our neighbors that they were reclaiming parts of our yard for creek mitigation. So we lost about 30 feet of our yard. That took a while for me to get over, but I've convinced them to let me keep my native plants back there. So I'm slowly but surely just letting it go back to nature. This is my crossvine, which has pretty much bloomed all year long. There's a big oak tree in the neighbor's yard that shades it, so it doesn't get full sun, but it loves this spot, and the hummingbirds and the bees absolutely love it. This is what my little wildflower section looked like in the spring. As you can see, the sunflowers are coming up, and these were all basket flowers getting ready to put on blooms. The Gara hadn't quite come up yet, but you can see there's blue mist, and I have ironweed in there somewhere too. But this whole section is nothing but basket flowers. Here's one of my problems right here. Her name is Luna, and I have started putting out yarrow as a ground cover because they don't like the smell and they won't dig it up. And it's proven to be pretty hardy. It grows just about year round, and I can mow it down and it comes right back up. Here's my Flamacanthus. I know this is not a native to this area, but this bush has been in this spot for several years, and I just cut it back and it comes back like gangbusters. In the summer, it's covered in red flowers. and the hummingbirds absolutely love it. This was their favorite bush. And this was in the middle of the summer when it hadn't been watered very little this summer, but it continued to bloom. This is one of the beds in my back. You can see I have Grennis. I have some nearly soaked grass back there. I have swamp sunflowers, blue mist, sunflowers, you name it. I've got it all stuffed in this little bitty bed. Here's some wine cups that were coming up. So there's not a whole lot of room for weeds. I think this was a sunflower that came up from the birds. The birds loved it. The bees loved it. So I just left it there. I had a lot of pipevine in a section of my yard, and the caterpillars just go crazy every year. And they chew it down to the ground and it comes right back up. And sometimes I'll have 20 or 30. There's bees on the blue mist. My coneflowers have done very well in this section. They're shaded by a yopon, and they bloom just about all summer. They had multiple blooms. This is Liatris that's coming up. Oh, there's a deer in our backyard. I'm just kidding. Grannis and wine cups together. I try to pair colors together. So I thought the white and the wine cup colors did well together, along with the blue mist. This is American germander. And I don't know how many of y'all grow this, but I like it. It has these little white blooms on the ends, and it did very well all summer. It was very drought tolerant, enjoys the full sun. Here is another picture of that flower bed. As you can see, I've got a lot of coneflowers, these wine cups, pipevine. Another picture of that flower bed. These are my rosin weeds. This is one of my favorite plants. I have several of these. They got extremely tall. They lasted all summer, did very well. And they just stopped blooming probably a month or so ago. I think they're beautiful. And the bees with the butterflies love them. More blue mist. I love this plant. You don't have to do anything to it. It just keeps growing. And as you can see, you don't always have to put everything in the ground. I had an old wheelbarrow that I converted to a planter, so I've got blue mist and planting weed in here. They like to live together. I'm sorry. Here she is again. Yeah, this is my buttonbush tree. I love this bush. It has been covered with bees all summer long. I've just left the seed pods on there, and the birds are in and out of it all the time. Very bee and bird friendly bush. This is another buttonbush that I planted. This was from a cutting, and this bush is probably 2 years old. So they grow pretty fast. Got my little chili pekin right there. It bloomed all year too. It didn't bloom the first year, but this year it bloomed. This is what my stock tank looks like. I tried to put my fish in there. I've got 2 of them. And this is when I first started it. But I think they cooked this summer because the water got too hot. So I've kind of given up on fish for the moment. Another view of my little tank and all my yarrow. Here's my other tank that I've started. So this will be a work in progress. I may move this one too. That's a good thing about tanks. You can just move them around to different places. I wanted to show you this. I pick up 3 trees all the time, and I had brought home some redbud seedlings in the spring. And not a week later, the insects had found them and had started chopping away. So it just goes to show you that it doesn't matter, what container or how little or how big they are, they will find it and go to town on it. This is my salvia in the back, and as you can see, it's huge, and I just let it go, and it just keeps reseeding. As you can see, I've got it everywhere. The bees just go crazy for it. This is a section of my back. I've got a lot of planting weed and bone set that have taken over this little section of the flower bed, and they bloomed all summer too with very little water. They did very well. This is a cicada killer that's on the goldenrod, and they really like it. A lot of bees on the goldenrod. This is nearly silkgrass that I have in one of my beds, and it's so heavy with blooms that I've had to prop it up with a little fencing that it's still blooming. I love grasses. This is more grass that I have planted in the back, and this muley is just beautiful against the blue mist. This is one of the reasons that I have chosen to go native. This is one of the butterflies that we see the most of. And this was a little visitor that I had this spring. he stuck around for quite a while. And that was right there at the gate. So I could see him every time I went in and out. This little guy was always hanging around on the lily pads. Another reason that I keep a lot of litter and stuff in the yard, a lot of leaves. We have a lot of birds because we live behind a creek. So we have a lot of water birds. Here's another reason. We have hawks that have babies in one of our trees every year. So they come back every year and have 2 or 3 babies. So we get to watch them every spring. Here's another one of our visitors. We've had several different kinds of snakes, and they're all non-venomous. They like to kind of, I think, eat the toads and the lizards. We have a family of armadillos that have lived underneath our deck for a long time, and they have holes around the fence that they go in and out of. They are very aggressive. They will chase the dogs into the house. I kind of just leave them alone. They dig holes, and I go fill them up. We coexist. One of my favorite pictures of one of our little babies looking out at us. Here's another visitor that we have quite a few of. This is what I've done with the side of my yard. This is all obedient plant and blue mist. There's a lone goldenrod that looks like it's coming up. This bed stays full of this, and I'll probably have to weed it out next year because it's gotten so overgrown. This is another view of that side of the yard. As you can see, I've just gradually removed as much grass as I can, and I've made beds in between houses. But I have a lot of basket flowers, goldenrod, wedge scale, and some slender wood oats here that are coming up, some brennis, bird bath. So it's just slowly going because this is pretty much all shade over here on this side. And this is the area that gets sun, this back here by the fence. So that's why I put the basket flowers and the goldenrod back there. And this is where all the magic happens. This is my little growing area, which goes to show you don't need a whole lot of space. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Virginia Pearson Turner grew up in Shore Acres in the 1960s when it was still mostly prairie and woods, a habitat that she cherished. Since purchasing her first home, she's been dedicated to preserving or recreating that natural habitat. Virginia has kept Texas Native Plant Society paper newsletters from that era and is grateful for the Clear Lake chapter and all she's learned to aid her in this endeavor.
Good evening and welcome to my yard. I'm Virginia Pearson Turner and I live in Bayside Terrace in LaPorte. Little neighborhood established in 1928. That is before HOAs and bulldozers that clean scrape subdivisions. So welcome. This is where my home is. I wanted to show you that I'm close to the Shore Acres Monarch Way Station. And then also this area, 107 acres, was just recently purchased and preserved by Galveston Bay Foundation, which kind of balances that I have to live close to Bayport. That is the bane of my existence. This is where I started. I had a half acre, which was great. I love my home, and I had 2 great oak trees. I also had Chinese tallow, invasive lantana, bamboo, and St. Augustine grass. And I also have the worst gumbo ever. I know you might think that you have bad gumbo, but until you've been to Shore Acres, you just don't know. Also, I will say that I know of 3 different instances that my whole yard was inundated with salt water. So that adds a whole nother layer of issues. I've taken all the NCLP classes and I've tried to pattern my yard after the things I've learned from the classes. The whole purpose is to make everything look intended, not untended. And we can do that in different ways. So I use a lot of signage. This is the one that I'm most proud of from Texas Parks and Wildlife. Really took some work to earn this one. Always talks about using borders and clean edges. So I always edge along the outside flower beds, either with wood or with the edger. I use hardscapes, my bird bath. I've got an arbor with a bench that's got coral honeysuckle. This is that more sunny area along the fence, grouping things by color. I also use some cultivars, not a whole lot. But sometimes I have a nice mounded habitat, and I always watch them to see if get one and see if the pollinators like it just as much as everything else. I started with plastic borders, but I kind of got away from that. And I'm trying to use more natural borders, wood. This provides habitat for critters, as well as when it decomposes, it improves the soil. So this is the other side of the fence. There was an NCLP class specifically for birds. Talked about the importance of all the layers, and I really took that to heart. This is what I started with Pittispora and Nandina. I did have a possum haw and a yopon that I planted when I first bought the house because I knew I needed some food for some birds and I wanted those in the yard. So I still have those, but I've added inland sea oats. I hope that'll fill in here. Notice I'm still keeping the edges. I've also added roughleaf dogwood, shining sumac. I've got elderberry and pigeonberry. And then on this side, I've got oak leaf hydrangea, Turk's cap, sweet spire, little Mexican buckeye. Again, you can see the elderberries back here. So a lot of activity, a lot of layers for the birds. This is another view. This is looking towards the pond. This is where the pond area, that first slide you saw, this is a little porch off my bedroom. This is all my bedroom windows. And this is the bird area. So I think that turned out pretty. I like it. One of the things they taught us in the class is landscape for ourselves, not so much for curb appeal because we live in our houses. We don't live out in the street. And so that's what I've tried to do. This is my chair that I sit in the morning, can have my coffee and look out at that bird area that I just showed you. This is at my dining room window. It's looking a little rough after the drought. You know, things are pretty beat up. I didn't cut things back because of the drought. I just left things be. But this is mist flower, and you see some goldenrod, ivy leaf thoroughwort, Turk's cap, more Turk's cap. This is out one of my kitchen windows. You can see the arbor I have there. Looks a little bit better here. This was in the spring when everything was blooming nice. So like wind chimes, I have those outside of a lot of the windows. My favorite view, this is from my kitchen window. And this is my bird bath that you've seen in the pictures, also my hummingbird feeder. There's always stuff happening. I think that's a squirrel. This was an owl in the evening taking a bath in the bird bath. And this is a red-tailed hawk eating a whippoorwill. And he's sitting right up here in this tree, right outside my kitchen window, because it's kind of sad and kind of cool at the same time. Nancy really wanted me to talk about the pond, so I'm going to get to that now. The pond and the best neighbors. I have Misty and Eric, my son Alex, and their son Caven. And they just did it for me. A lot of work to dig that hole. This is off that porch, dig that hole. We did line the pond. We put rocks in it to keep the liner from rising up when we filled it. One thing I do different is I did put in a shallow end. It's been really, really hard to keep clean. I did that so stuff couldn't get trapped in there, but you can do that with rocks and stuff now that I know that was not necessary. Also make your pond twice as big as you think it needs to be. The bigger you make it, the more established the ecosystem can get and the less maintenance you have to do. Because in the beginning, I did way too much maintenance because I thought it needed to look like this. So pristine, you can see all the pretty rocks everywhere, crystal clear, shiny water, just lovely. And the frogs liked it. I mean, I had tadpoles and stuff. But every year, I would go through this clean out process to get it to look like that. I would clean all this up. I would plant the native Texas-Oklahoma seed mix from wild seed. I've been very happy with that, and it grows in and fills in quite well. It does include like some coneflowers and stuff that get more established over time, perennials too, so I like that mix. But the plants decided they did not want to be controlled like that. So this is what the plants thought it should look like. And so I like this picture. This is the view I think the critters get when they come up from that bird area again and see the pond and creeping spot flower, and you can see the Louisiana iris. So this is what they see, and I think they feel right at home. This is all getting a little bit more established. You can see signage that I put in there. Got a lot of parentis here, buttonbush. But again, I think it's a lot prettier now that it's happy and just doing what it wants to do. I do have to do some maintenance, but not like I used to, which was a nightmare. I repotted all the plants, put the pretty rocks on top of them every year. I cleaned all the rocks, I drained the pond, got all the muddy out of it. This is what I look like when I got through doing it, all to make it look pretty. But when I quit doing that, I got a lot more of this, which makes me happy. This is a helgamite. This is the larvae of the dragonfly. Now that I'm not disturbing the pond so much when I clean it, I have a lot more of these. I have frogs getting busy. creating a lot of tadpoles. I had a green heron, which is pretty rare. I was excited to see her in my pond. This is a night heron. We have a lot of those in the neighborhood. The juveniles come to my pond to learn how to fish. The moms bring them. So I always have a lot of babies. Dragonfly actually laying her eggs in the pond. These guys came through on a migration, and there are like 20 something of them. And they just hung out for a few hours and then went away. It was just a joy to see them. And a lot of snakes, which I really like because I have to deal with all the rodents that come in from the port. Ponds are work. Stuff still happens. This was after Hurricane Nicholas. Big branch came down on the pond. Giant branch. Flattened kind of everything, but everything came back. The original filter that we designed ended up, it wore out. I went to Nelson Water Garden. They've been really helpful and nice. And they taught me how to do this. And all I had to do was buy this tub. It was like $25. I got the plants from Mary Carroll. A lot of the plants in the pond are from her. She sells wetland plants. The pickerweed came from our buddy Patty Steinke, though. Give her mom credit for that. Doris. But the bog filters do work best. I would recommend one of those if you put in a pond. Again, the NCLP classes teach us that we want to show our yards to be intended, not untended. So to kind of recap, use the signage. You saw those in a lot of my pictures. The plant labels, actually label them. I've seen people take pictures of the labels when things are blooming so they know what they are. Quite a few of my neighbors have been to our plant sales, so that's working. The defined edges we showed in several of the pictures, the different borders that I use. Share info. We actually have a Facebook page for the neighborhood. So this is a recent post I put on there. Wet drought. This is Barbados cherry. I got 9 likes and 4 people asked for clippings. So just educating your neighbors, letting them know what we're doing. And then the hardscape, I showed you the bench and the arbor and the bird bath that I use. So that helps. A couple of recent projects. This was an area in interior courtyard that originally I planted with all tropicals because I thought that would be cool. After the 2 freezes, none of them survived. So the turtles weren't happy. We decided to go back with native. So I've got Turk's cap, scarlet sage, mealy blue sage, beautyberry, sweet spires. This is that Rubberville sedge. Some blue mist flower over here at Barbados cherry. I'm also capturing rain, and we had a class on that. This is actually an idea I stole from Nancy, which is the bucket at the valley with the rain chain. The barrels I got from Galveston Bay Foundation as a fundraiser. Lyondell Basel donates them, and I think it was like $45 or something. Plus, I got this screen from Amazon. They do have a spigot in them, so I can use them to water. Another and you also saw those, by the pond. I have some, and that's what I use to refill the pond. So I can have chlorine-free safe water for the pond. This is a rain garden I put in, again, with Nancy's bucket and the rain chain. We dug this out. No rain barrel because it's the front of the house trying to make it look attractive. But my son dug all this out, and we amended the soil, expanded shale, etc. Put in some more water-tolerant plants. I made sure it was drained, checked the level and everything, and been real happy with that. So with that, thank you very much.
Patty Steinke has been a member of the Native Plant Society since 2015 and a member of the Clear Lake chapter since it was established in 2016. Retired from a 37-year teaching career in biology at San Jacinto College, Patty is now chair of the chapter's Community Outreach Committee, chairperson for Keeping Friendswood Beautiful, and a master naturalist in the Galveston Bay Area chapter.
Hi, I'm Patricia Steinke. I want to show you my attempts to bring more native plants to my property to attract more wildlife in Friendswood. We live on 0.6 acres. So we have a large backyard with lots of turf, 4 live oak trees, 1 loblolly pine, and 1 river birch. In this photo from 2016, you can also see the pampas grass lining the back of the property and a faux riverbed with a bridge between 2 arbors, along with my original 2 grandchildren. After joining the Native Plant Society and attending the chapter's first plant sale, I started putting in native plants in 2018. I was inspired by local parks and many speakers, especially the natural pond and small prairie at Russ Pittman Park, and our chapter speaker on natural ponds, Christine Povinelli. You can see that presentation on our YouTube channel if you're interested in the installation of a natural pond. Our first step was to take out the 27 mature pampas grass plants indicated by the red X's. This area is now our largest native plant bed. It measures 70 feet long and 12 feet deep. 3 years later, we dug out the dry faux pond indicated in blue. We still have lots of turf for the grandkids to play on. Like everyone else, my yard is a constant work in progress. Now the back of my property is the long native plant bed with a natural pond. Let me show you some of the photos of what we've accomplished so far. I use plants from our chapter's plant sales and lots of seeds from the Native American Seed Company to fill in the back bed. It is lush and inviting for animals in the spring. When we made the pond, the red wooden bridge fell apart. So we salvaged some of the pieces and I incorporated them into the prairie. Early in the season, bee balm, coneflowers, and black-eyed Susan are attracting and feeding the pollinators in this long pollinator bed. Other spring annuals include coreopsis and whitecup. My favorite native shrub, Virginia sweetspire, has done quite well in this corner. Fall is time for the tall frostweed and Missouri ironweed to take over the show in the back bed. I've included also some special spots for wildlife to make residence, most of which were purchased from Friendswood Garden Emporium, including the mason bee home, the butterfly home, the bat home. The toad home was handcrafted by our talented chapter member Tracy Reback, who then also gifted me the owl house. Other favorite fall flowering plants include blue mistflower and my continuously flowering aquatic milkweed, both serving as nectar and food sources for animals that I'm attracting. I also tucked some perennials in beds closer to my house. Turk's cap and coral honeysuckle help keep the visiting female broad-tailed hummingbirds happy in the spring and in the fall as they migrate through. These plants thrive in the morning and the evening shade provided by my house. I've been really pleased this year that my coral honeysuckle has also berried. Last year I installed this bed. It's a new look for my front yard and for me, rather wild and unorganized. I enjoy gazing out the window to see the constant show of the gaura and the firewheel and the visiting pollinators. The muley grass and the southern wax myrtle give the bed a great foundation. Returning to the backyard, we added the pond 2 years ago. This photo was looking towards my house, and you can see the children's play area a little bit towards the back. The pond has become part of the children's play area. The grandkids get excited catching stuff out of the pond. This is the basic design of our pond. We dug out the faux riverbed that had been there for years. We wanted the pond to be next to the large native plant bed in the back, allowing wildlife to have the food, water, and shelter really close together. So you can see I have a narrow area and a wider area, and the whole length is about 17 feet. We lined the pond after it was dug out with professional quality EPDM liner as recommended by Christine Povinelli, again at one of our Zoom meetings. Since we have no power that far out in our yard, we went with a solar pump just to provide aeration. It sits on a concrete block in the pond. The photo panel for the solar pump sits on top of my large Buddha. I circled it there in yellow on the right picture. Now, this is a side view of the pond. The black line indicates the black liner. Sometimes the back of our property holds water after a really good rain. We were concerned that water would then seep under the pond liner, so we created a berm, which you can see in brown, using soil and the small pebbles from the old faux riverbed. We then added flagstone all the way around to hold the liner in place. The widest part of our pond is also the deepest part of our pond at 36 inches. This is the view of the pond looking towards my house, again showing its position in my yard. The potted plants are in the wider, deeper portion of the pond. We put the pond vegetation that roots into flexible black canvas plant containers, and then we put soil and rocks in those plant containers to hold them down. We then set them on pavers like the one that's shown on the right to get them to the proper depth in the pond. When we filled the pond, we used the filter that you can see also on the bottom there. And we have had to add some water to the pond a couple of times. That filter is used because it helps us remove the chloramines that are in the water. In the original year, 2021, we didn't have to put any additional water in the pond after we finished filling it. We added water once in 2022 and then twice in this past summer, 2023, because of the drought. But overall, the pond rarely needs the addition of water. Here are two of my grandsons having fun looking for what lives in the pond. It's a regular activity. The original gambusia or mosquito fish were netted out of area ditches here in our neighborhood. That's all that we put in to populate the pond as far as animals are concerned. The tadpoles, the dragonfly larvae, all different kinds of snails, my resident frog, everything else just showed up. I wanted to profile the vegetation in my pond. By far, the plant that has thrived the best is the pickerel weed. The original plant was harvested from the banks of the San Jacinto River on my mother's property in Conroe. It flowers continuously through the fall. The water lily also flowers beautifully and continuously spring through fall. The original plant was a gift from fellow pond enthusiast Virginia Pearson Turner. It provides a great resting spot for frogs, dragonflies, bees, and occasional birds. The leaves of this plant have amazing adaptations to allow the leaves to float. The lizard's tail provides vegetation all season, but only flowers in the spring. It was another gift from Virginia. I got this iris at one of the chapter's plant sales. It has multiplied by rhizomes, but I haven't seen it flower yet. Maybe next spring. These are a few of my favorite photos from my yard. My native plant journey continues and is constantly changing. It is a welcome challenge and the results are thrilling. Having native plants that attract animals of all types to my yard is so rewarding. My plants require little water and attention. I hope you are also taking a similar journey at your home. Thanks for visiting my yard.
Jesus Suarez is a Texas master naturalist and an active member of the Clear Lake chapter. He's been landscaping with Texas native plants since the late 1990s. What influenced him to use native plants was living in the Middle East in the early 1990s and watching the only TV program available in English, a 24-hour nature channel.
Good evening. My name is Jesus Suarez. I'm happy to be on season 3 of Clear Lake Chapter Struttin' Our Stuff. Weather-wise, this year was difficult for our plants, people, and animals due to freeze, heat, and drought. This presentation adheres to Nancy Saint's guidance. Although we all have less than spectacular gardens this summer, we must be truthful. So I'll be truthful. Near the end, there's a prequel and sequel to this, so stay tuned. Our backyard landscape has both sun and shade. When landscaping with native plants, part of the truth is it just doesn't happen. In the next few slides, I'll show how our home landscape evolved. In 2007, we moved to our home where there were 2 live oaks in the backyard, one on either side. There were also 12 kumquat trees planted in 2 rows. This wasn't my idea of landscaping, and we did not like kumquats. The concept sketch for our sun and shade backyard considered the orientation to the north and the path of the sun. Considering the view from different angles, we divided the backyard into thirds. 1/3 was hardscape, 1/3 sod, and 1/3 beds. Distances from the house and the fence were important, as we preferred beds not placed against the fence, allowing us to walk around and access the beds. We envisioned a future curved patio and designed our beds in a curvilinear pattern to create a more natural state. Curvilinear allows the illusion of depth and provides interesting views. Lastly, I considered irrigation needs now and in the future. My simple sketch was the design drawing. I was so excited with all the plants that I could use. In the shady area, I envisioned a canopy planting where each tree's limbs touch the adjacent tree's limbs to allow enough room that the trees maintain their natural state. But when I laid the design out with a 10-year tree, I realized that I had to reduce the number of trees from 6 to 3. Now it was time to start the project. The beds were laid out with newspapers on top of the existing sod to prevent grass growth. A steel border was installed. The topsoil mix was added. Trees were then planted in holes dug through the builder sand and down to the clay. The dogwood and willow oak were eventually removed due to space constraints. Lots of wildflowers were planted in a small area of our backyard, which was originally a prairie. Several blocks away from our home is what used to be the fringe of a bottomland hardwood forest. The next slides are in quick succession to show how the landscape evolved. In 2010, photos of sunny and shady side. With the wildflowers, I was trying to control the uncontrollable. Their nature is to spread and compete. In hindsight, this was too much. Notice the steel edging on the sunny side, which was covered with flat stones for aesthetics. On the shady side, there was still enough sun to grow some wildflowers. In 2011, growth was prolific. Everything just took off. This photo shows what eventually would be shaded. Trees planted for screening started to grow quickly. You can see the many different flowers: Indian blankets, black-eyed Susans, salvias, primrose, and passion flowers. The goldenrods had not yet flowered. In 2013, the peach tree I planted a few years before had really grown. The peaches were delicious. The squirrels also thought so. Notice the trellis installed for the passion vine. Come to find out, the passion vine has a mind of its own. By 2017, the sun and shade effect was becoming more pronounced. You can clearly see the contrast of the 2 sides. The list shows plants that thrive in the sun and shade. This is a 2018 view from above that shows what was growing in the spring. The non-native loropetalum adds interest. 2019, a photo of a migrating and tattered monarch. Some flowers that grew well in the sun. Late winter 2020. These are one of the few pictures of winter I could find. Apparently, the winter months are especially dreary in my garden. We kept the blinds closed since there was too much brown to bear. On the left photo, you can see the Mexican plum starting to bloom. It's very fragrant. On the right side, you can see hundreds of basket flowers starting to come up. The Mexican plum is also in this photo. Now for last year. In October, I removed most of the basket flower stalks about 12 inches from the ground because I was told the stalks provide winter habitat for some insects. You can still see some stalks in the middle of the sunny bed. Shown below the right photo is what bloomed. On to November. Later in the month, changes happen quickly as leaves began falling and plants become dormant. Full disclosure, a photo from 2020 was not available, so I used a November 1st, 2023 photo. December brought a rare freeze. The Turk's caps and salvias froze. This is a good time to start transplant. Not many December photos as I was out most of the month. In January, the beds are dreary. Because of the freeze and how bad everything looked, I thought most of the plants would not return. In February, there's lots of cleanup after the gloomy winter. The swamp maple, variant Drummondi, is starting to seed. You can see the red seeds on the large maple. The seeds helicopter down to find a place to propagate. The squirrels love to feast on these seeds. In the bottom close-up photo, the prolific basket flowers have seeded and are growing exponentially. Controlling them is a regular chore, pulling them up weekly for about a month. Moving into March, the trees are leafing and the plants are returning vigorously. In the left photo, the Mexican plum would have been blooming, but it succumbed to insects, dry weather, freeze, or old age. It's now an empty space next to the water oak. I bought a new one at the Clear Lake Chapter spring plant sale. The lantana is blooming. In April, it's greening up nicely. Plants are forming nice bunches with different colors, textures, and shapes. In May, the contrast of sun and shade along with the taller plants in the back are taking shape. I trimmed goldenrods and basket flowers to gradually slope upwards towards the back of the beds for added visual interest and accentuate depth. In June, this was the day before we left on a multi-week vacation. It was looking really nice. Little did we know that this was the beginning of the heat and drought. We normally don't water much, but since we were leaving for an extended period, we turn our irrigation system to on every 5 days. July, this was the day after we returned from vacation. I called it neglect. The morning glories were definitely in their glory. They pulled everything towards the ground. It was hot and dry. I hand watered a lot of small plants. August, the heat and drought were still with us. I increased irrigation to 2 times per week, mostly for home foundations since the soil was drying out. The concrete curb around our patio cracked as the soil dried. September brought measurable rain, and there was a plant revival as they soaked up their last nutrients before fall. October 15th, we made it with minimal plant casualties. A recap. Throughout the summer, we didn't notice many insects or birds, which was different than other years. Anoles were on the prowl and most likely ate caterpillars, which are normally called fritillaries and black swallowtails. For the first time I can recall, birds had eaten almost all the American beautyberries, which normally last through winter. Some of the plants, notice the Gulf fritillary on the passion vine. In the second photo, the hummingbird is difficult to see on the Turk's cap. More of the plants, more plants, and yet more native plants. And lastly, more plants. And now for the prequel and sequel. The prequel is titled, I'll Take 2 of Each. As a rookie, I wanted to have as many native plants as possible. Our prior home was my first attempt at landscaping with Texas natives in the late 90s. I was very enthusiastic, wanting 2 of everything. I received a Texas Wildscape certificate. When we sold this home, the new owner removed nearly all the landscaping except a few trees. Now, the sequel is called Opportunities Abound. If you want native plants in the area for a longer time than home ownership, volunteering in the community is a good way to accomplish this. Nipsot and Texas Master Naturalists do this very well. Also look for opportunities within your neighborhood. For example, for our HOA, I led the selection and planting of over 600 native trees. We also implemented different landscaping practices to help preserve trees. We landscaped the entrances along with the parks using mostly natives. We reduced water consumption by 40%. We reduced mosquito spraying. We use pesticides only as needed, for ants mostly. Herbicides are used only on unwanted weeds and hardscapes. And worked with like-minded people and showed others the benefits of landscaping with native plants. Putting this together was fun. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.
Oh, what a marvelous evening. Let's see. Who had the American germander?
That was me.
Okay, Cheryl. And did you get seeds or plants?
I bought my first American germander at one of our plant sales. And now I dig it up and spread it all over the place.
Okay.
It's like blue mist. All you need is one.
Uh-huh.
It's a great pollinator plant.
Oh, okay. Your crossvine was just outstanding. Did you do anything to make it bloom all year?
No, did nothing. I think it's just in the right place for it to thrive.
Yeah.
A little bit of sun, a little bit of shade.
Uh-huh. Okay. I noticed you told us that you use some microlife in the spring and fall. Okay, Virginia. Let's see. How long did it take to go from your initial plantings? And you've answered that 7 to 8 years. So be patient. I know several of you have commented, and I always was a believer in that, of take a look at what you see from inside the house. I mean, how much of the day are we inside, especially a day like today? And to have some interesting plants and flowers, that's a great thing to have. So educational to know natives don't need fertilizer. All right. Well, thank you all for attending tonight. And I just see your heads buzzing with ideas, how you're going to implement that at your house.